"That one," the magician said, and his white glove came up and pointed straight down the line at Thomas Vane. "The tall one with the empty eyes. Bring him up. I want the dullest mind in the room." The whole long gallery laughed. 300 guests in their best, the chandeliers throwing fire off the gilt, and the man on the little raised stage knew exactly how to ride a laugh. He let it build, lifted one eyebrow, and the laugh climbed higher. I was standing 4 men down from Vane on the wall behind the velvet rope, and I felt the rest of us go a degree more rigid, the way you do when a thing turns toward your own. The magician's name was Calder Wynne, and the gala program called him the greatest illusionist of the age. And for 1 hour that night the sovereign's long gallery in Whitmore Palace belonged to him. I have stood the wall beside Thomas Vane for 6 years. I know the back of his neck better than I know my brother's face, and I want to tell you before any of the rest of it that I did not know him at all. "Don't be shy," Wynne said, walking the front of the stage with a deck of cards fan in one hand. He wore black on black, a single white rose at his lapel, and he moved the way water moves, no wasted thing in him. A palace guard, the very symbol of a mind that does not think. He stands all day and stares at nothing, gentlemen, because there is nothing behind the stare. A clock with a man's face. Bring him up here and let me show you the inside of a head that's been polished smooth. He found the laugh again, and he smiled at it like a host. "You, the statue, up." The master of the household, Lord Aldrich, was sitting in the front row in his sash and orders, and he gave the smallest nod. "Go on. Play along, it's the entertainment." That nod was an order. Vane stepped off the wall. I will tell you what I saw because I was close, and because afterward I went over it 100 times. Vane grounded the butt of his rifle, handed it to the man beside him without looking, and walked up the 3 carpeted steps onto the stage. He did not hurry and he did not drag. He stood where Wynne put him, hands at his sides, chin level, eyes forward over the heads of the crowd at a point on the far wall. The bearskin made him look 7 feet tall. Under the chandeliers his medals threw little stars. He looked, exactly as the magician had promised, like a clock with a man's face. "There he is," Wynne purred. "Ladies and gentlemen, the king's own scarecrow." Laughter. "Now I'm going to read this man's mind. It won't take long, there's not much to read." Bigger laughter. "He liked that one. You could see him file it away to use again in the next city." I felt the heat come up my own collar. We are trained for this. You take the spit, the slap, the shove, the joke, the camera in your face, and you give it back nothing, because the nothing is the whole point. The man who cannot be moved is worth more than the man who hits back. But there is a particular cruelty in being made the fool in front of 300 people who will never know your name, and I hated Calder Wynne in that minute with a clean, useless hatred. I thought, hold, Thomas. Just hold an hour. Then we go back to the wall and this is over. I did not yet understand that Thomas Vane was not enduring anything. He was working. "A simple test," Wynne announced. He produced from nowhere a silver coin, turned it over his knuckles, made it walk, made it vanish, made it appear from the white rose at his lapel. The crowd murmured the murmur they make. Even a child can follow a coin. Let's see if the king's clock can. He held it up between 2 fingers. "Watch the coin, soldier, try." Vane watched the coin, or seemed to. I knew that stillness. I'd stood inside it on the wall 1,000 mornings. But there was something in the set of his shoulders that I had never seen on the wall, and I couldn't have told you then what it was. Now I can. It was interest. Wynne closed his fist on the coin, waved his other hand over it, opened the fist. Empty. He spread both hands wide, gone, you see, vanished into the air, and the crowd gave him his applause. He turned to milk it, arms out, the showman in full sail. And Thomas Vane said, in a voice that carried to the back of the gallery without seeming to rise at all, "Left sleeve, the seam above the cuff, it went there." The room did not laugh. The room did something worse. For Calder Wynne, it went quiet and leaned in. Wynne's smile did not move, but something behind it did. He turned back to Vane slowly. "I'm sorry." You palmed it on the turn, Vane said, level, unhurried, eyes still forward. When you spread your hands for the applause, you tucked it into the seam above your left cuff. There's a slit there sewn to hold it. It's a good slit. The stitching is dark on dark, and you keep that side angled away. But you favored the right hand for the spread, which means the weight was in the left, which means the coin never left you. A pause. Then, almost gently, "May I see your left cuff, sir?" You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Lord Aldrich had gone very still in the front row. 300 guests were looking at the magician's left wrist. Wynne laughed a beat too late. A lucky guess. The soldier's been to a show before. He flicked his hand, summoning the next thing, the patter rolling back over the silence like a tide coming in. But I had stood beside that man 6 years, and I had never once heard him volunteer a sentence on duty, and now he had taken a celebrated illusionist's trick apart on a stage in front of the court, as plainly as a man names the streets of his own town. I looked down the line at the others. Every one of them had the same thought on his face. Who is he? I should tell you who I am, so you know whose eyes you're seeing this through. My name is Edmund Carrow, no relation to the Carrow of the Kingsmere Gate, though we get asked. I've stood the Whitmore Wall 11 years. I'm not a clever man, and I have never pretended to be. I am a steady one, which the guard values more, and I had spent 6 of those years convinced that Thomas Vane was the same as me, only taller and quieter. He never spoke of where he'd come from. The file said he'd transferred in from another department, the kind of phrase that means a desk, a depot, a posting too dull to name. He was good on the wall. He was perfect on the wall. He noticed things, a tourist's hand drifting where it shouldn't, a parked car too long at the curb, a man in the crowd whose eyes went to the roof lines instead of the gates, and he'd murmur it to the sergeant and be right, every time, and we put it down to a good soldier's instinct and thought no more. That night in the long gallery, watching him hand a magician his own sleeve, I started to think more. Wynne recovered fast. Men like Wynne always recover fast, it's the trade. He smiled wider, spread his arms, and made the next 10 minutes a wall of dazzle, silks and flame, a borrowed watch crushed and whole, a dove from a folded fan. He did not call Vane dull again, but he did not let him off the stage either. He kept him up there, the silent prop, and I understood that the magician had decided something. He was going to break the statue before the night was out. He was going to find a trick the clock could not read, and he was going to make Thomas Vane the fool he'd promised the room or die trying. He had chosen, without knowing it, the worst possible man in 3 kingdoms to make that bet against. Let me back up an hour to before any of it, because the small things matter and I missed all of them. We'd been told a week before that the gala would have entertainment, and that the wall detail would stand the gallery rather than the gates that night, a soft posting, an inside duty, the sort the older men angle for. The famous Calder Wynne was coming. Half the younger guards were quietly thrilled. Even on the wall, a man hears of Wynne. They said he'd walked out of a locked iron box dropped into a river. They said he'd made a coach and 4 vanish off the palace drive at his last command performance in front of the old sovereign, and that the old sovereign had laughed like a boy. He was not a card table conjurer. He was the real article, the one the others copied, and the gala was as much for him as for the guests. That afternoon, drawing kit in the muster room, I'd watched Vane oil his chinstrap buckle and said, to make talk, "You ever see this Wynne fellow?" "Once," Vane said. "Good as he?" Vane thought about it longer than the question seemed to want. "He's very good," he said at last. "He's the best I've seen at making you look where he wants. That's the whole craft, you know, not the hands. The hands are nothing, it's the looking. He owns where every eye in the room goes, and he's owned it since he was a boy. Frightening, really, what a man like that could do if he'd gone another way." Then he'd put the cloth down and gone quiet again, and I'd thought, how would a wall soldier know the difference between a good magician and a frightening one? And then the sergeant called the detail, and I forgot the thought for 6 years' worth of an hour. So the gallery, the chandeliers, 300 guests and Wynn owning every eye in the room except one pair which would not be owned, and which the magician had been fool enough to invite up onto his own stage. "A new test," Wynn announced, when the Silks and the Dove had bought him his ground back. He clapped once and two footmen carried out a tall lacquered cabinet, black with gold lacquer dragons, doors front and back on little brass casters. He threw both doors wide and rapped the walls solid, you heard it, good honest wood. "The vanishing cabinet," he said, "as old as my trade and twice as honest. I will step inside. I will close the door. And I will be gone, not behind it, not under it, gone while the doors stand open to your eyes. And our friend the king's clock, a little bow toward Vane, will tell us all how it's done, if he can. Soldier, come, stand at the back doors. Press your hand to the cabinet so you feel there's no trick in the wood. Watch closely. Try to keep up." It was a trap, and a clever one. He'd made Vane part of the apparatus, hand on the wood, vouching for it, so that when Wynn vanished anyway the soldier would be the very man who'd sworn it was solid. The fool made twice over. I saw the shape of it from the wall and my stomach turned. Vane crossed to the back of the cabinet. He set his white glove flat against the lacquer, and I watched him do a thing so small that I am sure I was the only soul in that gallery who caught it. Before he laid his hand on the wood, his eyes went not to the cabinet, not to Wynn, but down once to the casters, the little brass wheels, and to the floor beneath them, where a seam ran between two boards of the gallery's parquet, a seam most men would never see. His eyes touched it for less than a heartbeat and came back up, forward, blank. He'd found it already. I didn't know what it was, but I knew the look of a man who has found the answer and is choosing whether to give it. Wynn stepped into the cabinet, faced the front, and spread his arms in the open doorway. "Watch the open doors," he told the crowd. "Watch them the whole time. The doors never close on both sides at once, see." He pulled the front doors to, and the back stayed open, framing his back. Then he reached round, the showman's grin, and you saw straight through. "Now," he said, voice muffling as the front shut fully, "count with me. 3, 2. On one the back doors swung shut of themselves. A drum rolled. Then all 4 doors burst open, front and back, and the cabinet was empty. Empty as a coffin. You could see the dragons on the inner walls, the open air beyond. Calderwin was gone. The gallery erupted. Even Lord Aldrich was clapping. It was, I will say it plainly, magnificent. A grown man vanished from a box you could see through in the middle of a lit room. And from the back of the gallery a door opened and Calderwin walked in down the center aisle, dry, smiling, white rose at his lapel, to a standing roar. He let it wash over him a full minute. Then he raised a hand, and the room hushed, and he turned and looked up at Thomas Vane, who had not applauded, who had not moved from the back of the cabinet, whose gloved hand still rested on the lacquer. "Well, clock," Wynn said, and the cruelty was all the way out now, silk over a blade. "Tell us, or has the famous staring soldier finally met a thing too deep for him?" The room laughed, and it was an ugly laugh this time, the laugh of 300 people who decided which man they were rooting for, and it wasn't the one in the heavy fur. Vane took his hand off the cabinet. He looked at it, his own glove, for a moment, the way you look at a tool you finished with. And then he spoke, and again the voice carried without rising. "The cabinet has a false back panel hung on a counterweight," he said. "It dropped on a cord when the rear doors began to close. That's the drum roll to cover the sound of it. You went through the panel and down, not behind the cabinet. Under it." He tipped his chin, the smallest degree, toward the floor. "There's a trap in the parquet here between the 3rd and 4th boards. The casters are set to straddle it so the cabinet always parks dead over the hatch. You marked the spot with the brass studs in the carpet runner, I expect, so the footman could line it up without thinking. You dropped through into the under gallery, crossed beneath us while we watched an empty box, and came up through the service stair behind the far door. 40 feet, perhaps. You'd want a man below to catch the panel and reset it and to open the hatch and close it after you. So," he looked for the first time directly at Calderwin, "there are 2 of you tonight, sir. There always were. The trick isn't the box. The trick is the floor, and the second man no one's been told to watch. For the length of 3 full breaths, the long gallery of Whitmore Palace made no sound at all. Then somebody near the front laughed, a short, startled bark, and somebody else, and it ran the room, and it was a different laugh entirely from before. They were not laughing at the soldier now. The whole gallery had just been shown, in plain words, that the man they'd watched walk down the aisle to his ovation had in fact crawled 40 feet under their feet in the dark, while a wooden box held their eyes. And the man who told them was the one Calder Wynne had called a clock. Wynne's face did a thing I have seen on the wall, on the faces of men whose plan has just come apart in public, a sort of flinch held still by will. To his credit, it lasted only a second. Then he laughed too, louder than anyone, and threw up his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am robbed," he cried, "robbed by a sentry. Give the man his due." He applauded vain, slow, and theatrical, and the room took it up, and for a moment it might have ended there, with the magician graceful in defeat and the soldier walking back to the wall a quiet legend. I wanted it to end there. I have learned to read the weather in a room, and I felt the better weather come in. But Calder Wynne was a proud man, and proud men do not let the weather decide. He kept clapping until the room quieted to hear him, and then he said, light as anything, "Of course, a guess, a very fine guess. The cabinet is a famous illusion. A careful student of the magazines might piece it together, given time, given a good seat." He smiled up at Vane. "But you didn't have time, did you, soldier? You called it in 10 seconds, hand on the wood, never having seen the piece. That's not the careful study of a magazine, that's something else." He tilted his head, and I did not like the new light in his eye, because it was not anger now. It was hunger. "I make my living reading people, friend. It's the whole of the craft, as I expect you know. And I've been reading you since you came up those steps, and you are not what you're dressed as." Wall soldier sees a coin and watches the coin. "You watched my hands and my hem and my weight in the floor. You watched the way I watch a room. So, before these good people, I'll make you an honest wager." He turned and played it to the crowd. "One trick, my best. A thing no man has explained in 20 years on 3 continents. If our scarecrow reads it, truly reads it, the method, out loud, I'll grant before the court that I've met the finest eye in the realm, and I'll never call a guardsman a clock again. And if he can't," the smile, "then he admits before all of you that he got lucky twice and goes back to his wall, and we say no more about it. Fair." The room loved it. Of course they loved it. Lord Aldrich, I saw, did not. His mouth had thinned, but the guests were roaring for it. And a master of the household does not stop the entertainment the court is enjoying without a reason he can name aloud, and Wynne had given him none. The wager stood whether anyone allowed it or not. I looked at Vane and willed him to refuse. "Walk away," I thought, "you've won. There's nothing up there for you but a fall." Vane looked back down the line at us, at the wall, at me, for the first time all night. And I swear he knew exactly what I was thinking, because the corner of his mouth moved just barely, the way it never did. Then he faced Wynne and said, "Show me your best, sir. I'll watch." The crowd roared. Footmen began clearing the stage for whatever was coming. And in the bustle, the sergeant of our detail, old Brant, stepped close to me along the wall and murmured out of the side of his mouth, "Caro, you knew him before this." "6 years on the wall," I murmured back. "Didn't know him at all." Brant was quiet a second. "Brant has 30 years in. Brant knew the guard when half of us were boys. I pulled his transfer file once," he said, very low, watching the stage. "Years back when he came to us. Routine. The posting before this one was blanked, not redacted, blanked. A reference number and a department I'd never heard of, and a single line over a signature I didn't know. Released to ceremonial duties, conduct exemplary, do not discuss prior service." I asked the major. The major told me to forget I'd seen it. Brant's eyes never left the stage. "I forgot it until about 10 minutes ago." I felt the hair stand on my arms. "What department, Sergeant?" "It wasn't a name," Brant said. "It was a crest. A little printed crest at the head of the page, an owl and a key in its claws and no words." He shook his head a quarter inch. I've been a guardsman 30 years, Caro. I've stood beside generals and shaken hands with men who run the realm. I have seen that crest exactly twice, both times on a door I was told to walk past and never describe. It's the people who do the work the realm doesn't say it does. The watchers. The ones who read the men who do us harm before they do it. The ones who break the other side's tricks. He drew a slow breath. I think we have been standing 6 years beside a man who used to break tricks for a living, and not coin tricks. On the stage, the lacquered cabinet was wheeled away and something else was wheeled on, under a black cloth, and Calder Wynne was rolling up his immaculate sleeves with the relish of a man who means to win or burn the room down trying. And it came to me, standing there, why Vane had said that afternoon that a man like Wynne was frightening, what he could do if he'd gone the other way. Vane hadn't been talking about magic. He'd been talking about the trade he himself had left. The reading of rooms. The owning of where every eye goes. The deceiving of men for a living. Calder Wynne used it to make a coach vanish for applause. Somewhere in a department with an owl and a key for its only name, Thomas Vane had used the very same art for the realm, and had walked away from it to stand a wall and say nothing, which is its own kind of discipline, harder than the wall. The black cloth came off, and the gala held its breath for the trick that was meant to break him. It was not a box. That was the first surprise. I'd expected another cabinet, another vanish, something with doors and casters Vane could read off the floor. Instead it was a plain table, a single high-backed chair, and on the table 3 things. A glass bowl, a brass-bound writing box, and a long envelope of heavy cream paper, sealed with a great blob of black wax and propped upright against the box where every soul could see it. "No casters," Wynne said, smiling at Vane. "No trap, no second man, nothing under the floor and nothing up my sleeve. I'll roll them to the shoulder, look." He did. "This is the oldest magic and the only kind I truly love. I will tell you a thing before it happens, that's all. A prediction. I wrote it an hour ago, before I ever knew which of you statues I'd call up, and I sealed it in this envelope, and the envelope has not left this table or your sight since I walked in." He held the room a moment. "And here is the test, soldier, here is the thing your eyes can't help you with. You can watch my hands all night. There are no hands in this. There's only what I knew before any of us walked into this room. Read that if you can." He had Lord Aldrich himself come up and confirm the seal unbroken. The old man examined the wax, pressed it, nodded grimly, sat back down. The crowd murmured. A sealed prediction vouched by the master of the household. There was nothing to watch. That was the genius of it. The cabinet had a method you could see if you knew where to look. A prediction made an hour ago had no method visible at all. It lived entirely in the past where no eye could reach. "Now," said Wynne, "I need a free choice freely made from a mind I cannot have influenced." He smiled. "Which is why I'll use the freest mind in the realm, one with nothing in it for me to push against. Soldier, come to the bowl." In the glass bowl were perhaps 200 small folded paper slips. On every slip, Wynne said, a different word. Written by my assistants this afternoon, hundreds of words, no 2 alike, names of cities, of flowers, of animals, of the days, anything at all. A whole world of words folded blind. You'll reach in, soldier, and stir them and take one, any one, your free choice, none of my doing. You'll open it and read your word aloud to the room. And then he laid one finger on the sealed envelope. "We'll break the seal Lord Aldrich has guarded, and we'll find that an hour ago, before I knew your face, I wrote the very word your free hand would choose. That is my best. That is the trick no man has read in 20 years. He stepped back and folded his bare arms. "Choose your word, clock. Make it as free and as random as that empty head can manage. And then tell these people how I knew it, or admit you can't. I have never wanted to be wrong about a man so badly, because I could not see it. I am not clever, I told you, but I am not a fool, and I looked at that bowl and that envelope and Lord Aldrich's own word on the seal, and I could find no floor to drop through, no sleeve, no second man. A free word from 200, and a prediction sealed and guarded before the choosing. If Vane named a method, any method, The magician had only to open the envelope and show the right word, and Vane would be the liar. And if Vane couldn't, if he stood there silent, the wall lost. Vane walked to the bowl. He looked into it. And he did the thing again, the small thing that I'd been watching for all night. His eyes moved where no one had told them to. Not into the bowl, across it. He looked at the bowl, and then at Wynn's hands folded on his bare forearms, and then at the writing box, and then, for a moment, that stretched at the envelope, at the black wax, at the way it stood propped against the box rather than lying flat, and then at Lord Aldrich in the front row, and then back to the bowl. He did not reach in. "Before I choose," Vane said, "may I ask the room a question?" Wynn's smile thinned. "It's not your trick, friend." "No," Vane agreed, "but you've made it mine to read, and a man should read all of it." He turned, unhurried, to the gallery. "How many words are in the bowl?" 200, called a guest helpfully. "He said hundreds." "He said hundreds," Vane repeated. "A whole world of words," he said, "no two alike." He looked back at Wynn. "May I show them, sir? Not the method, your method's your living, and I'll not take a man's living from him on a stage, but the shape of it, just the shape." "You're stalling," Wynn said, and the silk was gone now, the blade bare. "You can't read it, so you make a speech. Choose your word." So Vane chose. He reached into the bowl, and here is the thing, he did not stir, he did not dig deep. He simply took the first slip his fingers met at the very top plainly, as a man takes the top card of a deck. He unfolded it. He read it to himself, and something crossed his face that I can only call sadness. The sadness of a man who'd hoped to be wrong and isn't. "My word," Vane said to the room, "is harbor." A ripple. Wynn's arms unfolded. He spread them toward the sealed envelope, toward Lord Aldrich, the showman swelling, the trap sprung at last. "Then break the seal, my lord," he called, "and read what I wrote an hour ago before God and this court." "It will say harbor," Vane said. "Of course it will." And he set the slip down on the table, face up, and the gentleness went out of his voice, and what was left was flat and clear and absolutely certain, the voice, I understood now, of a man who had spent a career taking apart the work of people far more dangerous than a stage magician. "Open it, my lord, it will say harbor. Then take the next slip from the top of the bowl, and the one under it, and the one under that. Take 10, take 20, take them faster than he can stop you." He looked at Calder Wynn, and there was no triumph in it, only the steadiness of a man closing a door. "They all say harbor, sir, don't they? Every slip in the bowl, 200 slips and one word. There was never any choosing to read. There was only a man who'd made certain that whatever I picked, I'd pick what he'd already written, and counted on me, and on all of you, to believe my hand was free." Calder Wynn moved fast then, too fast, a step toward the bowl, a hand out, the smile snapping back into place. "Now that," he began, "is a slander against the oldest." But Lord Aldrich had already risen. He was an old soldier himself under the sash, and he did not enjoy being made a guarantor of a thing that turned out to be a lie. He took up the bowl in both hands before Wynn reached it, and he turned and tipped a fall of slips out across the green baize of the table where the whole front of the room could see, and he unfolded them, one and another, his thick fingers surprisingly quick. "Harbor," he read, "harbor, harbor." He unfolded a fistful at once and let them drift down. "Harbor. They all say harbor." He looked at the sealed envelope, and then he broke the black wax himself with his thumb, drew out the card, and held it up so the chandeliers lit it, a single word in a fine black hand. He did not need to read it aloud. The room read it. Then he set it down, very deliberately, and looked at Calder Wynn the way a master of the household looks at a man who has used him, and the gala understood that the entertainment was over. "I want to be careful here, because this is the part that tells you who Thomas Vane truly is, and it is not the part you'd expect." Wynn stood there stripped, bare-armed, his great trick lying in 200 identical pieces on the baize, 300 faces turned cold. A lesser man on that stage, a man with something to prove, would have driven it home, would have explained the rest of it, the way the slip is forced, the way the patter steers, the way a magician makes a marked man feel free, would have taken Calder Wynne apart down to the bone in front of the court that had laughed at him. Vane had the knowledge to do it. I'd watched him use a tenth of it, and it had been enough to silence the room twice. He didn't. Vane gathered the spilled slips back into the bowl with his own gloved hands, gently, as a man tidies a thing that's been broken, and he set the bowl upright on the table, and he turned to the room. "It's a fine trick," he said. "Truly, I want you to hear me say it. The force in the bowl is old and beautiful, and to bring it off as smoothly as this man does on a strange stage with a soldier set against him, that's a lifetime's art. Most of you would never have caught it. You weren't meant to." He paused. "I caught it because catching it used to be my work before I came to the wall. I'm not a cleverer man than any of you. I was only pointed for a long time at people who lied for far worse reasons than applause, and you don't unlearn the looking." He glanced at Wynne, and the hardness was gone. What was left looked almost like kindness, the kindness of one tradesman to another. "You called me dull, sir, predictable, a mind polished smooth. You were closer to right than you know. The whole of my old trade was being the dullest man in the room, the one no one watches, the one who watches everyone, and you've just learned in front of all these people why a clever man should never, ever pick the dull one to make a fool of. We tend to have been chosen for it on purpose." For a moment Calder Wynne just looked at him, and then, and I did not expect this either, the magician laughed. Not the showman's laugh, a real one, short and surprised and almost grateful. He rolled his sleeves back down and he bowed to Thomas Vane, a low, unhurried bow, the kind one master gives another. 20 years, he said. 20 years, and a wall soldier reads me cold and then hands me back my living in one piece on a stage he could have buried me on. He shook his head. "What in the realm were you before that fur?" "A man who's not allowed to say," Vane said. "Same as I am now." "Then I won't ask twice." Wynne straightened, turned to the court, spread his bare arms wide, and made the only move a great showman can make when he's beaten. He gave the room to the other man. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, "I came here the finest eye in the realm, and I leave second to a sentry. Stand for him. I mean it, stand." And the long gallery of Whitmore Palace rose to its feet, 300 of them in their orders and their silk, and they put their hands together for Thomas Vane, who stood very still under the chandeliers with his chin level, and his eyes forward over their heads at a point on the far wall, enduring the applause exactly the way he'd endured the mockery an hour before, giving it nothing, because the nothing was the whole point. Then he came down the 3 carpeted steps, took his rifle back from the man who'd held it, and fell in beside me on the wall as if none of it had happened. We stood the rest of the gala in silence. That's the job. But near the end of it, in the small dead hour when the guests had thinned and the chandeliers were half put out, Lord Aldrich himself came along the wall, the master of the household, walking the line, and he stopped in front of Vane. We all braced. You do not get walked up to by the master of the household for nothing. The old man studied Vane a long moment. "I had a man on my staff once," he said quietly, "who wore a crest with an owl and a key. He told me a thing I never forgot. He said the realm's safest rooms aren't the ones with the most locks. They're the ones with the right man standing in them looking dull." He let that sit. "I didn't know we had one of you on the wall, guardsman. I'm glad of it. And I'll see your file stays exactly as quiet as it's meant to." "Thank you, my lord," Vane said, "nothing more." Aldrich nodded once and walked on, and that was all. I never did get the whole story out of him. I tried the next morning in the muster room, and Vane oiled his chinstrap buckle and said only, "There's nothing to tell, Edmund. A man does a job and then he does a different job. This one's better. No one shoots at you and the boots are warm." And he wouldn't be moved off it, which by then I understood was the most Thomas Vane thing in the world. But I think about it still, about the man who let a beaten magician keep his secrets, when he could have stripped him bare. About the years he stood beside me saying nothing while he read every threat that ever drifted past our gates and murmured it to the sergeant and was always right. about a whole career of being the dullest man in the room on purpose, so that the dangerous men would look anywhere but at him. We think the strong man is the one who acts. We are wrong. The strongest man I have ever stood beside spent his life choosing not to, choosing the wall, the silence, the level chin, the eyes forward. And the one night the world made him show what was behind the stare, he used it to humble a man and then to spare him, and walked back to his post and asked for nothing. Calder Wynn played 3 more cities that season, they say, and at every one he told the story of the night a KingsGuard read him cold, and he told it well, the way he told everything, and it only made him more famous. But he never again called a guardsman a clock, and I never again looked down our line and thought I knew the men I stood beside. You don't, you know. The realm is held up by quiet men you've decided are dull. I'd stand the wall with any of them now and wonder, and that wondering Vane taught me is the beginning of respect. He's still on the wall this morning, tall one, empty eyes staring at nothing. There's a great deal behind the stare. I just had to be shown.